Teacher notices student always eating alone, follows him after class and discovers a shocking secret. The cafeteria buzzed with the chaotic energy of middle schoolers, laughter erupting from corner tables, food being traded like currency, and the constant shuffle of plastic chairs against linoleum floors. Ms. Rachel Porter surveyed the room with practiced eyes that missed nothing. After 15 years of teaching 8th grade English at Westfield Middle School, she had developed an intuition about her students that transcended academic performance. "Ms. Porter, can you settle something for us?" called Aiden from the popular table, surrounded by his usual entourage. Rachel smiled and wandered over, listening to their trivial debate about a video game while her attention drifted to the far corner of the room. There, at a small table designed for two, sat Elijah Brooks, alone, as always. The boy hunched over a worn paperback, his lunch barely touched. His dark hair fell across his forehead in a way that obscured his eyes, creating a physical barrier between himself and the world. Rachel had noticed this pattern for weeks now, Elijah arriving precisely 4 minutes before the bell each morning, participating in class with brief but thoughtful answers when called upon, then vanishing the moment school ended. "Earth to Ms. Porter?" Aiden waved his hand, bringing her attention back. "Sorry, kids. Teacher brain wandering," she said with a gentle laugh. "Looks like the bell's about to ring. Better finish up." As the students began clearing their tables, Rachel casually made her way toward Elijah's corner. By the time she reached his spot, he had already packed his belongings with military precision, leaving no trace behind, as if he'd never been there at all. "Enjoying that book, Elijah?" she asked, nodding toward the dog-eared paperback he clutched. His eyes met hers for just a moment, intelligent, guarded eyes that seemed to carry the weight of someone far older than 14. "Yes, ma'am. Library book." His voice was soft but clear, revealing nothing. "Steinbeck is pretty advanced for 8th grade," Rachel noted. "What do you think of his perspective on family bonds?" Something flickered across Elijah's face, a micro-expression that disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. "I think he understands that sometimes family is all you have when the world turns its back." Before Rachel could respond, Elijah had slipped past her and joined the stream of students flooding into the hallway. Later that afternoon, during her planning period, Rachel found herself pulling up Elijah's student file on her computer. His academic record showed consistent B-minuses across all subjects, never excelling, never failing, perfectly flying under the radar. Attendance, impeccable. Behavioral notes, none. Emergency contact, Gloria Brooks, aunt and legal guardian following parental death, car accident, 2 years prior. The phone number listed returned an automated message stating the number was no longer in service when Rachel had tried calling about a permission slip last month. A knock at her classroom door interrupted her thoughts. Zoe Chen, one of her more perceptive students, stood in the doorway clutching a notebook. "Ms. Porter? I had a question about the essay outline," she said, approaching Rachel's desk. Her eyes flicked to the computer screen. "Oh, Elijah Brooks? He's in my math class too." Rachel minimized the window, maintaining her professional smile. "Just checking some records. What can I help you with, Zoe?" The girl hesitated. "The essay is fine, actually. But I saw you watching Elijah at lunch." She lowered her voice. "There's something weird about him, isn't there? What makes you say that?" Rachel asked carefully. Zoe shifted her weight. "My mom works at City Hall. Last month there was this community memorial service for some elderly residents who passed away during the winter. I went with her, and I saw Elijah there, standing in the back. He was wearing this too big suit, but he wasn't with anyone. When people started talking to him, he just disappeared. Do you know whose memorial he was attending? I think it was for Gloria Brooks. Mom said she was some retired librarian who died alone with no family." Zoe shrugged. "Except Elijah was there, so I guess that wasn't true." Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. Gloria Brooks, Elijah's emergency contact and legal guardian. "Thanks for letting me know, Zoe. About that essay outline." After Zoe left, Rachel couldn't focus on grading. She opened her classroom window, letting in the crisp October air as her mind raced. If Gloria Brooks had died last month, who was taking care of Elijah now? And why hadn't the school been notified of a guardianship change? Over the next week, Rachel observed Elijah with renewed attention. She noticed details she'd overlooked before: the same 3 rotating shirts, always meticulously clean but fraying at the cuffs. How he collected untouched fruit from the cafeteria trash when he thought no one was looking. The heavy backpack he carried everywhere, far fuller than needed for daily classes. The faint smell of industrial soap, the same brand the school used in the gymnasium showers. Most concerning was what happened when a sudden downpour drenched students during outdoor break. While others complained about wet clothes, Elijah had quietly panicked, frantically trying to dry the contents of his backpack with paper towels in the bathroom. Rachel had glimpsed inside: extra socks, a small photo frame, some canned food. Friday afternoon, Rachel approached the principal's office with her concerns, only to find him rushing out to an emergency district meeting. "Can it wait until Monday, Rachel? Unless it's an immediate safety issue?" She hesitated. "I'm not entirely sure it isn't." "Well, document everything and we'll discuss first thing Monday. If you're truly concerned about potential abuse or neglect, you know the protocol: call family services directly." But something held Rachel back from making that call. She'd seen too many students chewed up by an overloaded system with good intentions but devastating results. Instead, as the final bell rang and students flooded toward freedom, Rachel made a split-second decision. She grabbed her jacket, car keys, and a stack of papers as pretense, then followed at a careful distance as Elijah Brooks walked alone down the school's long driveway, turned left instead of right toward the residential neighborhoods, and began a journey that would change everything Rachel thought she knew about survival, sacrifice, and what it truly meant to protect your own. Rachel kept her distance as she followed Elijah's path away from the bustling main streets. The October sky had darkened prematurely, heavy clouds threatening another downpour. She watched as the boy walked with purpose, his worn sneakers moving silently across the pavement, backpack straps clutched tightly in both hands. Instead of heading toward the apartment complexes where most students lived, Elijah veered unexpectedly toward the edge of school property. Rachel frowned, slowing her pace. This area housed the abandoned East Wing, an older section of Westfield Middle School condemned 4 years ago after plumbing issues caused structural damage. The district had fenced it off, perpetually delaying renovation due to budget constraints. Elijah glanced over his shoulder, and Rachel ducked behind a maintenance shed. Her heart hammered in her chest. What was she doing? Following a student without authorization could cost her job. Yet something deeper than professional concern drove her, a mother's instinct perhaps, though she had no children of her own. When she peered out again, Elijah had vanished. "Damn it," she whispered, scanning the perimeter of the condemned building. The chain-link fence appeared intact, warning signs clearly visible. "Danger and no trespassing." Rachel approached cautiously, circling toward the back where overgrown bushes obscured the foundation. There, partially hidden behind a tangle of brambles, she spotted it, a rusty cellar door tilted slightly open, leaves disturbed around its edges. Rain began to fall, light drops quickly transforming into a steady shower. Rachel hesitated, then made her decision. She pulled out her phone, turned on the flashlight, and crouched by the cellar entrance. Lifting the creaking door, she discovered a narrow set of concrete steps descending into darkness. "Hello?" she called softly. No response. Common sense screamed at her to leave, to call the authorities. But what if Elijah was hurt? What if this was simply a teenage hideout, and her report brought unnecessary trouble to a boy already struggling? Drawing a deep breath, Rachel descended the steps. The air grew musty as she moved deeper underground, her phone's light casting eerie shadows against moisture-stained walls. This had once been a storage area for the school's maintenance equipment, before the flooding had rendered it unusable. At the bottom of the stairs, Rachel swept her light across the basement. Old desks and chairs were stacked against one wall, broken filing cabinets against another. Water stains marked the ceiling, but surprisingly, the floor appeared relatively dry, Someone had laid down plastic sheeting in strategic places to redirect potential leaks. "Elijah?" she called again, her voice sounding smaller than intended in the cavernous space. A sound, fabric rustling against concrete, came from behind a large metal storage cabinet. Rachel moved toward it cautiously, her light revealing a narrow passage between the cabinet and wall. What she discovered beyond made her gasp audibly. A makeshift living space had been meticulously arranged in the back corner of the basement. A twin mattress, likely salvaged from the nurse's office during renovation, lay on a platform of wooden pallets, elevated from the potential damp of the floor. Milk crates served as bedside tables. A camping lantern provided soft illumination. A plastic storage bin held neatly folded clothes. Another contained what appeared to be non-perishable food items. A 5-gallon water dispenser stood in the corner. Most striking was the wall space above the bed. Pages torn from school textbooks had been taped up, creating a collage of mathematical formulas, historical timelines, and literary quotes. A child's crayon drawing depicted 2 stick figures holding hands, the sun shining above them. "Who are you?" demanded a voice from behind her. Rachel spun around, her light momentarily blinding Elijah, who stood protectively in front of the makeshift curtain that separated this space from another hidden area. "Elijah, it's Ms. Porter," she said gently, lowering her phone. "I was worried about you." His face hardened, shoulders tensing. "You shouldn't be here. You need to leave." "I can't do that," Rachel replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Not until I understand what's happening." "Is this where you've been living?" Elijah's expression revealed nothing, but his eyes darted nervously toward the curtain behind him. A soft shuffling sound came from beyond it. "Please," he whispered, his voice cracking for the first time. "Just go. Pretend you never saw this. I can help you," Rachel said, taking a step forward. "Whatever's going on." A small cough interrupted her, followed by a tiny voice. "Eli? Who's talking?" The color drained from Elijah's face. In that unguarded moment, Rachel saw raw fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for whoever waited behind that curtain. Before either could speak, the fabric parted. A small girl, no more than 6 years old, peered out. She had the same dark eyes as Elijah, her hair pulled into uneven pigtails tied with frayed ribbon. She wore a clean but faded dress, layered with a sweater several sizes too large. "Are you Eli's teacher?" the little girl asked, stepping out fully despite Elijah's attempt to keep her hidden. "He says you're really nice." "I'm Maya." Rachel stared in disbelief, pieces of the puzzle clicking into horrible place. Not one child hiding in this forgotten basement, but 2. "Yes," she managed to say through her shock. "I'm Ms. Porter." Maya smiled, revealing a missing front tooth. "Do you want to see my school? Eli made it for me." She pointed proudly toward a separate corner where a small desk had been arranged with workbooks, pencils, and a row of library books. Thunder crashed overhead, and Maya flinched, pressing against her brother's leg. Elijah's arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders as he stared at Rachel with a silent, desperate plea in his eyes. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the rain pounding against the cellar door above. "I'm hungry, Eli," Maya whispered, breaking the tense silence. Rachel watched as Elijah's expression shifted from fear to practiced reassurance. "Let me heat up some soup, okay? Can you show Ms. Porter your workbooks while I do that?" Maya nodded eagerly, grabbing Rachel's hand with surprising strength. The child's palm was warm and slightly sticky, a jarring reminder of her normalcy in this utterly abnormal situation. "I can read now," Maya announced proudly, leading Rachel to her school corner. "Eli taught me all my letters. Look." Rachel allowed herself to be guided, her mind racing. She needed time to process, to think clearly. Following Maya's lead, she sat on a small plastic chair clearly salvaged from an elementary classroom, her knees nearly at chest level. The child's learning area was meticulously organized. Workbooks, some official school materials, others handcrafted from stapled paper, were arranged by subject. Flashcards with vocabulary words sat in a repurposed tissue box. A makeshift calendar on the wall had days carefully crossed off. October 15th. Rachel murmured, studying the calendar. You've been keeping track. 63 days since Auntie went to heaven, Maya said matter-of-factly, opening a workbook. Eli says we have to keep counting so we know when it's important days. Behind them, Elijah had set up a camping stove on a metal tray. He opened a can of soup with mechanical efficiency, emptying it into a small pot. His movements were precise, practiced. This was clearly a daily routine. 2 months, Rachel thought, the reality sinking in. These children had been living here for 2 months, right under everyone's noses, with no one the wiser. Maya's very good at math, Elijah said suddenly, his voice tight. Show Ms. Porter your multiplication, Maya. It was a diversion, Rachel realized. He wanted to keep his sister occupied while buying time to figure out what to do about this intrusion into their secret world. Maya dutifully began reciting times tables, counting on small fingers. Rachel praised her automatically, her teacher instincts kicking in despite her shock. Meanwhile, her eyes cataloged details around the room. Extension cords secretly tapped into the school's electrical system, a plastic washing bin with soap, a calendar marking when school security did their periodic checks of the premises. Here, Maya. Elijah appeared with a steaming bowl of soup and half a sandwich. Eat at your desk like a big girl, okay? I need to talk to Ms. Porter. Maya nodded solemnly. Grown-up talk? Yeah, grown-up talk. He ruffled her hair gently. Elijah led Rachel toward the entrance, far enough that Maya couldn't overhear but close enough to keep her in sight. In the dimmer light, Rachel could finally see the exhaustion etched on his young face, the dark circles under his eyes, the tightness around his mouth that no 14-year-old should carry. It was supposed to be temporary, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. Just until I figured something out. Elijah, Rachel said carefully. I need to understand what happened. Zoe Chen mentioned seeing you at your aunt's memorial service. His eyes widened slightly. You've been checking up on me. I've been concerned, she corrected gently. Your emergency contact number is disconnected. Elijah's shoulders slumped. Aunt Gloria had a stroke 2 months ago. It happened suddenly. She was our only relative willing to take us after the accident. He glanced back at Maya, who was carefully eating her soup, swinging her legs beneath the desk. The hospital called me from her phone. By the time I got there, she was already gone. And you didn't tell anyone? His laugh was hollow, devoid of humor. Tell who? The school? Social services? I know how the system works, Ms. Porter. We'd be separated immediately. My parents died 2 years ago, and we went through 3 temporary placements before Aunt Gloria took us in. Each time, they tried to place Maya separately because she's more adoptable. The bitterness in his voice cut through the damp air. I promised my parents I'd keep her safe. I promised. Rachel's heart ached. So you came here? Elijah nodded. I remembered the condemned wing from orientation tour. The first night after Aunt Gloria died, we slept in the park. Then I scouted this place. No one ever checks it thoroughly, they just rattle the fence and move on. He gestured around. I've made it work. Maya doesn't miss school, I teach her everything the first graders are learning. I keep us clean. We have food. How? Rachel asked, though she suspected the answer. I had some of Aunt Gloria's Social Security money saved. And he hesitated. I take extra food from the cafeteria when no one's looking. The bathrooms in the gym have showers. We're careful. We don't damage anything. The practiced justifications broke Rachel's heart. These weren't the words of a rebellious teenager, but of a child forced to become an adult overnight. And at night? I lock the cellar door from inside. No one can get in. His eyes pleaded for understanding. Please, Miss Porter. Maya's happy. She thinks it's an adventure. If they separate us... His voice cracked. Before Rachel could respond, Maya's cheerful voice called out. All done, Eli! Can I have my reading time now? Sure, Peanut. He called back with forced normalcy, before turning desperately to Rachel. We just need more time. I'll figure something out by winter. Please. Rachel took a deep breath. I can't pretend I didn't find you here, Elijah. It's not safe, and it's not sustainable. The hope in his eyes died, replaced by resignation. Then, unexpectedly, his posture straightened, shoulders squaring with determination. Then I'll take her and we'll leave tonight. There are abandoned buildings near the harbor. That's not what I meant. Rachel interrupted. I'm not going to report you immediately, but I need to help you find a legitimate solution, one where you both stay together and stay safe. Confusion crossed his face. You'd help us? Why? A question Rachel wasn't entirely sure she had an answer for. Was it professional duty? Human decency? Or something more personal, a loneliness she recognized in herself reflected in these abandoned children? Because no one else is, she said simply, and with those 4 words, Rachel Porter crossed a line from which there would be no return. Monday morning arrived with painful normalcy. Rachel watched Elijah enter her classroom precisely 4 minutes before the bell, taking his usual seat by the window. Their eyes met briefly, an invisible thread of shared secrets stretching between them. He looked away first, shoulders hunched beneath the weight of uncertainty. The weekend had passed in a blur of research. Rachel had barely slept, her dining table covered with printouts of foster care regulations, local housing assistance programs, and legal guardianship requirements. The more she learned, the more overwhelmed she felt. When the final bell rang, Rachel approached Elijah's desk as other students filtered out. Math tutoring today, Elijah. Remember? He nodded, understanding their cover story. Once the room emptied, he asked, Is Maya okay? Yes, Rachel assured him. I checked on her during lunch. She was drawing pictures and working on the math worksheets I brought yesterday. The relief on his face was palpable. Rachel had promised to visit Maya twice daily, bringing fresh food and new learning materials. It was a temporary solution, dangerously temporary. I spoke with the school counselor this morning, Rachel said, keeping her voice low despite the empty classroom. Hypothetically, of course. Elijah's hands clenched around his backpack straps. And? Ms. Winters made it clear, any suspected case of unaccompanied minors must be reported immediately to Child Protective Services. Rachel hesitated. She also confirmed what you said about siblings often being placed separately. So you understand now, Elijah said flatly. This is why we can't tell anyone. Rachel pulled a chair beside his desk. I need to know everything, Elijah. The full story, not just the version you've been telling yourself to get through each day. Something in her tone must have reached him. For several moments, he sat silently, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he unzipped his backpack and removed a small, worn photo album. Our parents were architects, he began, opening to a picture of a smiling couple with younger versions of Elijah and Maya. Dad specialized in sustainable urban housing. They were driving back from a conference when a truck driver fell asleep at the wheel. Mom died instantly. Dad lasted 3 days in the hospital. Rachel studied the photograph, noting Elijah's resemblance to his father, the same serious eyes, the same determined set of the jaw. There was some money from insurance, but it went into a trust we can't access until we're 18. Our closest relatives were in Seattle, but they had 4 kids of their own and said they couldn't take us. The judge appointed a temporary guardian while they looked for placements. Elijah's fingers traced the edge of a photograph showing an elderly woman with Maya on her lap. Aunt Gloria wasn't really our aunt, she was our grandmother's best friend. She volunteered to take us when no one else would. She was already sick then, but she didn't tell anyone. And no one checked on her condition? Rachel asked, incredulous. Our caseworker came once, 6 months ago. Aunt Gloria rallied that day, made everything look perfect. The caseworker was overloaded, 20 minutes and she was gone, case closed. Elijah's bitter laugh held no humor. The system doesn't have time to really see people, Ms. Porter. The unfairness of it all made Rachel's chest tighten. What happened after she died? I panicked, he admitted quietly. I knew they'd split us up if I reported it. Maya had already lost so much. I couldn't. His voice broke. I just couldn't do that to her. So you created your own solution? He nodded. I told the landlord Aunt Gloria was in hospice care and we were moving to live with family. He was sympathetic, gave us 2 weeks to clear out. I took what we could carry, donated the rest, and we disappeared. The methodical planning of a 14-year-old boy to essentially become invisible shook Rachel to her core. How many other children fell through these cracks, she wondered, their absence noted only with a change of address form or a withdrawal from school enrollment. What about Maya's schooling? She should be in first grade. I registered her last spring, before Aunt Gloria got really bad. But when September came, Elijah shrugged. I called and said we'd moved districts. Elementary schools don't check as thoroughly as middle schools. They just marked her transferred. Rachel leaned back, processing everything. Elijah, we need to get you both legal help. What you're doing, it might feel like protection, but long-term, it's not sustainable. There is no other option, he insisted. There's always another option. Rachel countered, then paused as a knock interrupted them. Ms. Winters, the school counselor, stood in the doorway. Sorry to interrupt the tutoring session, she said with a pointed look at the distinct lack of math materials on the desk. But Principal Crawford wants to see you, Rachel. Something about concerns you raised Friday? The blood drained from Elijah's face. I'll be right there, Rachel said calmly. After Ms. Winters left, she turned to Elijah. I didn't report you. I only mentioned general concerns about your well-being. Nothing specific. But they're starting to pay attention. We need to leave, Elijah whispered, already calculating escape routes. Rachel grabbed his wrist. No. That's exactly what you can't do. Running now would only confirm suspicions. Go back to class tomorrow, act completely normal. I have an idea, but I need time. How much time? 3 days, she promised. By Thursday, I'll have something concrete. But Elijah, you need to trust me completely. Can you do that? He studied her face with eyes too old for his years. Do I have a choice? Yes, she said firmly. You always have a choice. That's what I'm fighting for. As she watched him walk away, Rachel felt the weight of her promise. She was gambling with the futures of 2 vulnerable children, operating in the shadows of a system designed to help but often failing those who needed it most. But beyond professional ethics and legal obligations lay a simple human truth. These children deserved better than what fate had dealt them. And sometimes, Rachel reflected as she headed toward the principal's office with a carefully crafted story ready on her lips. Doing the right thing meant first breaking a few rules. Rachel's living room had transformed into a fight room. Yellow legal pads covered her coffee table, scribbled with names, phone numbers, and meeting notes. Her laptop displayed a spreadsheet tracking conversations with contacts across various agencies. Wednesday night's rain tapped against the windows as she paced, phone pressed to her ear. Yes, I understand the protocol, but... She pinched the bridge of her nose. Could you at least tell me if siblings would remain together in emergency placement? Hypothetically speaking. The social worker's answer made her sink onto the couch. Thank you for your honesty, Rachel said before ending the call. Another dead end. 3 days had nearly passed, and her promise to Elijah loomed like a sentence. Her coffee had gone cold, much like the trail of hope she'd been following. She'd called in favors from college friends who'd become family lawyers, spent her planning periods researching alternative guardianship arrangements, and even contacted a former student who now worked at a youth shelter. The answers all circled back to the same bureaucratic labyrinth: report first, ask questions later, hope the system works as designed. But the system wasn't designed for cases like Elijah and Maya. A text message illuminated her phone: something's wrong. Security guard checking basement area tomorrow morning. Maintenance issue. Elijah. Rachel's stomach dropped. She'd given him her number for emergencies only. This qualified. Stay calm. Don't move anything tonight. I'll come early tomorrow. Trust me. She stared at her research, scattered and incomplete. She needed more time, but time had just run out. Thursday morning, Rachel arrived at Westfield Middle School at 5:30 a.m., an hour before even the earliest staff. The campus was silent, morning fog shrouding the buildings in ghostly gray. She parked in the back lot and hurried toward the condemned wing, a rolling suitcase trailing behind her. Elijah was waiting by the cellar entrance, dark circles prominent beneath his eyes. "Maya's still asleep," he whispered, helping Rachel maneuver the suitcase down the steps. "What's happening?" "Boiler inspection," Rachel explained. "They're checking all the basement access points after yesterday's heavy rain. We need to move you temporarily." Inside their hidden home, Maya stirred beneath a pile of blankets as they entered. Her sleepy eyes widened at the sight of Rachel. "Are we having school early today?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. Rachel forced a smile. "We're going on a little field trip. Can you help your brother pack your special things?" As the siblings gathered their belongings, Rachel explained in hushed tones to Elijah. "My friend Leslie runs a youth outreach program. She's agreed to let you stay in their resource room for 2 days, off the books. It buys us time." "And then what?" Elijah asked, efficiently rolling clothing into his backpack. Rachel took a deep breath. "I have a court appointment tomorrow morning with Judge Harriet Chen. She oversees family court cases in this district." Elijah froze. "You're turning us in?" "I'm fighting for you," Rachel corrected. "Judge Chen is known for unorthodox solutions in difficult cases. Before she makes any placement decisions, I need her to understand your situation completely." "She'll separate us," Elijah insisted. "Not if we provide a viable alternative." Rachel pulled a folder from her bag. "I've been building a case for a supervised independent living arrangement with conditional guardianship." Elijah stared at her blankly. "It means you and Maya stay together in supervised housing while I act as your advocate and educational mentor. It's rarely granted, but not impossible." The hope and skepticism warring on Elijah's face made him look younger than Rachel had ever seen him. "Why would a judge agree to that?" "Because I've spent 3 days gathering statements from every adult who's crossed your path. The librarian who's watched you teaching Maya to read. The grocery clerk who's observed you carefully counting change for nutritious foods. Your teachers who've noted your consistent performance despite obvious hardship." Rachel's voice strengthened. "You've proven yourself more responsible than most adults, Elijah. I'm making sure the judge sees that before making any decisions." Maya approached, clutching her stuffed rabbit and a folder of drawings. "I'm ready, Eli." The three moved quickly, erasing traces of their presence. As they reached the cellar steps, the beam of a flashlight swept across the fence outside. "Security," Elijah whispered, pulling Maya back into the shadows. Rachel's mind raced. "The utility tunnel. Does it still connect to the main building?" Elijah nodded. "Through the boiler room, but it's usually locked." "I have keys," Rachel said, pulling her master key ring from her pocket. "Lead the way." They navigated the narrow maintenance tunnel, emerging near the school's main building just as the morning custodian arrived. Rachel nodded casually, explaining she was showing new students around before classes. The custodian, accustomed to Rachel's early arrivals, barely gave them a second glance. In the parking lot, Rachel helped the children into her car, Maya's small hand clutching her rabbit as Elijah scanned the surroundings with practiced vigilance. "Miss Porter!" a voice called from the entrance. Principal Crawford waved, approaching with purposeful strides. "Just the person I wanted to see. Got a minute?" "Actually, I'm running an errand," Rachel began. "Won't take long," Crawford insisted, now close enough to peer curiously at her car. "Who's that?" Rachel's heart hammered against her ribs. In the back seat, Elijah had pulled Maya down, but her pink backpack remained visible. "My niece," Rachel lied smoothly. "And her brother. Dropping them at school after a dentist appointment." Crawford frowned. "Wanted to discuss the Brooks boy with you." Maintenance found something strange in the old basement. Looks like someone's been living there. Thinking we should call the authorities immediately. 1,000 responses flashed through Rachel's mind. Deflections, delays, distractions. Instead, she chose the truth, or part of it. I'm handling it, James. Trust me on this one. I need 24 hours. Rachel, if a student is in danger, it's more complicated than that. You know how broken the system can be. She held his gaze. One day. That's all I'm asking. Crawford's expression softened slightly. The board meeting's tomorrow afternoon. Whatever this is, it needs to be resolved by then. It will be, Rachel promised, though how she would keep that promise remained terrifyingly unclear. As Crawford walked away, Rachel slid into the driver's seat, hands trembling on the steering wheel. In the rearview mirror, she caught Elijah's eyes, filled with questions she couldn't answer, trust she hadn't earned, and fear she couldn't erase. Where are we really going? He asked softly. To fight for your future, Rachel replied, starting the engine. All three of us. The family courtroom felt smaller than Rachel had imagined. No dramatic high ceilings or imposing bench, just a practical space with fluorescent lighting and the faint smell of lemon cleaner. Judge Harriet Chen, a woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun, reviewed the hastily assembled case file with methodical attention. Across the room, two Child Protective Services representatives whispered to each other, occasionally glancing at Elijah and Maya, who sat stiffly in chairs that seemed designed for adult discomfort. Maya's legs dangled, not reaching the floor, while she clutched her rabbit with white-knuckled fingers. Elijah maintained his protective posture, one arm around his sister's shoulders. This is highly irregular, Ms. Porter, Judge Chen finally said, looking over her reading glasses. You're neither a relative nor a licensed foster parent. You've admitted to knowing about these children's situation for days without proper reporting. By all standard protocols, these siblings should be placed in emergency care immediately while the state determines appropriate placement. Rachel's carefully prepared arguments felt hollow in the face of such straightforward logic. Your Honor, I understand the protocols. I'm asking you to look beyond them to what's best for Elijah and Maya Brooks. And you believe that's not following established child welfare procedures? The judge's tone wasn't accusatory, merely inquiring. I believe these children have been failed by those very procedures multiple times. Rachel stood straighter. Their temporary placement after their parents' death was inadequate. Their elderly guardian's declining health went unnoticed. Their case was closed prematurely. And now the system's default solution would separate them, the very outcome their parents would have fought against with everything they had. Judge Chen turned to the CPS representatives. Is this accurate? Would standard procedure likely separate these siblings? The older representative cleared her throat. Given the age gap and our current foster placement availability, it would be challenging to keep them together, Your Honor. We would certainly try, but you can't guarantee it, the judge finished. She turned to Elijah. Young man, I'd like to hear from you directly. Elijah stood, his face pale but determined. Your Honor, I promised my parents I would protect Maya. Everything I've done, living in that basement, creating a routine, teaching her, it was to keep that promise. I know it wasn't ideal, but we were together and safe. That's all that matters to me. And you believe Ms. Porter's proposal would be better than foster care? Elijah glanced at Rachel. She's the only adult who saw us, really saw us, since our parents died. She could have reported us immediately, but she tried to understand first. That's rare. An unexpected knock interrupted the proceedings. The bailiff opened the door, and Principal Crawford stepped in, followed by Ms. Winters and, surprisingly, Zoe Chen. Forgive the interruption, Your Honor, Crawford said. We understand you're considering the Brooks case. We'd like to submit additional community testimony. Judge Chen raised an eyebrow but nodded permission. Crawford approached, handing over a folder. After Ms. Porter requested time yesterday, I began making inquiries of my own. What I discovered was a school community unaware that two children needed help, but immediately willing to provide it once informed. The judge opened the folder, scanning its contents with growing interest. Our school board has unanimously approved emergency use of discretionary funds to support temporary housing for the Brooks children. Crawford continued. Ms. Winters has arranged weekly counseling. 3 teachers have volunteered as academic mentors. And our student council, represented by Zoe Chin, has organized a support network. Zoe stepped forward, uncharacteristically nervous. We didn't know Elijah needed help because he never asked. But that doesn't mean we wouldn't have given it. Maya tugged on her brother's sleeve, whispering loudly enough for everyone to hear. See, Eli? I told you we weren't alone. Something shifted in the room, the invisible balance between protocol and human connection tipping toward the latter. Judge Chin removed her glasses, studying each face before her. In 30 years on this bench, I've seen countless examples of the system working exactly as designed, yet still failing the children it meant to protect. Perhaps today we need to design something new. She turned to the CPS representatives. I'm granting temporary conditional guardianship to Rachel Porter, with weekly supervision from your office. The Brooks children will be placed in the transitional housing program, with mandatory counseling and educational oversight. We'll review this arrangement in 90 days. The representatives frowned but nodded acceptance. Ms. Porter, the judge continued, this arrangement places extraordinary responsibility on you. Are you prepared for that commitment? Rachel looked at Elijah and Maya, 2 children who had already survived more loss than most adults. Yes, Your Honor. Completely. Judge Chen's gavel struck with surprising gentleness. Then let's proceed with the paperwork. 3 months later, Rachel stood at the edge of the Westfield Middle School playing field, watching Elijah pass a basketball to Zoe Chin. His laugh, something she'd never heard before that day in the judge's chambers, rang out across the yard. Maya sat nearby on a bench, legs now long enough to touch the ground, reading aloud to her classroom, buddy, as part of the school's new cross-age tutoring program. They're thriving, Principal Crawford said, joining Rachel. The board voted yesterday to convert the old East Wing into a community center instead of classrooms. They're calling it the Brooks Bridge Program, support services for students in transition or with unstable housing. Your idea? Not mine, Rachel corrected. Theirs. They built the bridge first. We're just making it visible. As if sensing their conversation, Elijah looked over and waved. No longer the invisible boy eating alone, no longer carrying the impossible weight of premature adulthood on his narrow shoulders. Later that afternoon, Rachel accompanied Elijah and Maya to the sealed entrance of the basement that had once been their secret home. School maintenance had welded the cellar door permanently shut, but beside it stood a small bronze plaque, recently installed. Maya traced the engraved words. Where courage found shelter and hope found a way. Was it really courage? Elijah asked quietly. Sometimes it felt like just being scared all the time. That's exactly what courage is, Rachel replied, placing one hand on his shoulder and the other on Maya's. Doing what needs to be done, even when you're terrified. Together, they turned away from the basement that had sheltered desperate secrets and toward the future they were building, a foundation far stronger than concrete walls, constructed from something the system couldn't measure, the simple, revolutionary belief that family, however you found it, was worth fighting for.